In this video, we're going to jump into part 2 of Introduction to Excel Pivot Tables. Now, in the prior video, part 1, we took a look at just a quick, simple introduction to creating a pivot table, dragging some fields in and seeing how you can quickly summarize large amounts of data inside of an Excel pivot table. Well, during this section, we're going to take those concepts a step further and provide a little more context on how you can summarize and calculate data inside of Excel pivot tables. So let's jump back into the example file. If you didn't participate in the part 1 video, I'm going to leave a card just up above where you can jump in and take a look at that video first and then jump back to this video right here. Just like before, I'm going to make this quick and simple so that you can jump down below inside the description, download the file, and try it out yourself as well. So let's jump in. Here, I've got the same file as the part 1 video, intro pivot tables 01, and I've got a table in here for customer orders. It's got various column headings and roughly 830 records that make up this list. So now I want to summarize this data, and the best, quickest way to do this is through an Excel pivot table. So first step, I click into the list, go to my Insert tab. I'm going to go to Pivot Table, from Table Range. Here, I get to select the data that I want to pull from. Because I already clicked into the list, it's grabbing my table called Customer Orders, and I'm going to put it into a new worksheet. I'll hit OK. All right, so now the beginnings of my pivot table. So in the part 1 video, we saw and I'm going to move my head out of the way here. We saw the pivot table field lists, right, which contains all of your column headings are right there. So I want to be able to pull some of those headings and drop them into one of the 4 sections to start summarizing this data. Well, let's grab the ship country. I'll drop that into the rows section. And now I want to be able to get a sum of the freight for those countries. So I'm going to grab the freight field and I'll drop that into the value section. And I've been able to quickly summarize the data here. Now this is great. Excel looked at this data and said, hey, you got these unique countries. You've got a sum of freight for all of the orders for these respective countries. And it just summed up those values. That's awesome. So now, because these are numeric values, right, I want, and their currency, I want them to look like currency, right? They should have the currency symbol in there and the proper decimal places and so on. So what I can do here is back into my field list, I'm going to click on the sum of freight. I'll give that just a regular left click. And one of the options in there is value field settings. So this is going to open up a nice little window for me where I can modify how that value is displayed and or calculated. So the first option there, I get a custom name. I can rename it if I like to. For now, maybe I'll just leave it as is. Down below, I can choose how it's summarizing it. Right now, it defaulted as sum, but I could do an average or a min or max for each country. You got multiple functions that you can use here to help you display and report off of your data the way that you want. But down in the lower left corner, I've got my number format. I'll give that a click, and I want this to be currency. So I'll hit OK. I'm going to hit OK again. And now I've got it formatted as a proper currency value. So simple little change inside there, but adding a little more presentation and context to the values that you're summarizing in your pivot table. Well, let's take this a step further. Like I said, the sum is nice, and perhaps that's what I want. I want us to be able to see the total amount of freight for each of these countries. Now, what if I want to see the sum of freight, but I also want to be able to see the average that we've spent for our shipping for these orders for each of these countries? Well, I'll go back to my field list once again. I'm going to grab freight a second time, and I'll drag that down into the value section. Whoop, there we go. And at first glance, it's just another sum of freight, right? It's exactly the same minus the formatting. Well, if I go back to my field list, I'm going to click on the sum of freight 2. I'll give that a click, go back to the value field settings we saw earlier. And within this window, first I'll change the name. I'm going to call this average freight. And let's see, freight, EI, right? I can never remember EIIE. There we go. Average freight. And now I'll change how it's summarizing it from a sum to an average. I'll hit OK. And now I've got my average freight for each country. Now, of course, I want to format that as well. So once again, back to my value field settings, get into that number format. I'll make it a currency. And we're looking good there. Average of freight. Did I change that earlier? I believe I changed that name. Average freight. EIGH. Yeah. All right, there we go. There's my name changed in there. So that's simple, just to be able to calculate and summarize data in your pivot table and change the calculation or how the data is being summarized in the pivot table. So make sure you try this out. Download the example file if you didn't do that in the first part 1 video here of Introduction to Excel Pivot Tables. It's in a link in the description below. And if you learned something new here, give the video a thumbs up. It helps me out a lot. And it lets other people know that you've learned something new here as well. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe to the content. You'll get notifications for new videos that I upload to YouTube. So thanks a lot, and I hope you enjoyed this video, a quick introduction on Excel pivot tables.